Hey, what's up everybody, and welcome to another JavaScript project. In this project, we are going to create some expandable cards. Now, let's just say we're creating a game site and we want to have more than one element on the screen, but only the main element should be displayed. And this is where this expandable cards project is going to become really handy. Now, let's also take a look at how we're going to achieve this. We're going to use query selector, all. We're going to use variables like const, functions, regular and error functions. Now we're going to manipulate the DOM a bit by toggling classes, adding and removing classes, and also selecting child nodes from the element. In order to achieve all of this, we're only going to use one event, and this is going to be the click event. Okay, so this is going to be just a simple project. Let me also show you the project. The main focus, as I said, is on these cards. When we hover over our one card, we are going to have a bit of hover effect, but this is going to be achieved using CSS. Now, when I click on another card, it's going to expand that card that I clicked on and compress the other card. Now, this is going to go through all of them, and as you can see, expand them and compress them again. Up here, we're also going to have a navigation, but this is achieved using Bootstrap. So, as I said, the main focus is on this card part. Also, the site is going to be responsive. So if I go into inspect mode and make this smaller, we'll see up here the navigation is going to change. We also can drop it down if we wish, but also the cards are going to expand, be responsive. Okay, so that's it for the project. Let's get into it. Okay, so on the left side we're going to have our code editor, and on the right side I just have opened my finished project. Now we are going to use also an Unsplash for the images, so I'm going to have this opened. The site is source.unsplash.com. So let's get into the code editor and let's create our first file, which is going to be the index.html. Then let's create a boilerplate, Shift1, and within here we're going to create first of all three things. So within our body, we're going to have a navigation. So let's type in here comment of nav. After that, we're going to have a header. So let's type in here header. And the last one will be the cards themselves. So let's type in here another comment of cards. Okay, now for the navigation, as I said, I'm going to use Bootstrap. So let's go to bootstrap.com, and for me, we're going to just click on Get Started. And I would suggest getting the CSS file, so copying the link. And if you wish to make your navigation responsive, you can also get the JavaScript file. So get the JavaScript file, copy it, and get the JavaScript link, copy it after the CSS link, and there we go. Let me make this just a bit smaller. Okay, next up, right before my title, I'm also going to link up our style.css, and we need to also create this file. Okay, so let's create our style.css, and just for now, I'm not going to touch it. Next up, let's go back into our navigation, and underneath our navigation, underneath the comment of navigation, we're going to create the navigation itself. Well, I'm not going to actually create it because there's a lot of code that it goes in there, but Bootstrap is going to help us out. So let's go back to Bootstrap, components, and from here we're going to go to nav bars down here. Now after clicking off nav bars, we're just going to select the first nav bar that pops in. So copy this entire code, just click on copy, or you could just select it and right click copy it. And now we're going to just paste it in. And there we go. We should have a navigation. Also, let's open this up using live server. So right click, open with live server, and close up the other one. So hey, there's a navigation. And if we click on it, it's also responsive. Okay, so that's it for the navigation part. We can also close up Bootstrap. We don't need it anymore. Now for the header part. The header part is actually just the title. So we're going to create within here a h1, and we're going to type in here games. And that's it. Now for the cards. I am also going to use Bootstrap for the cards. So let's first of all create a main tag and also give it a class of cards-container. And I'm going to use capital C here in order to differentiate between the main container, which is cards container, And now each card is going to have its own container, which is going to be called with a class of card container. And then within our card container, we're going to create another div for the card itself. So just a class of card. And after this class of card, we're also going to create the card title, which is going to be in h4 with a class of card title. And that's it. Now for the first title, let me also type in here. For the first title, we're going to type in PC game. And now we could just copy this 4 more times. So 1, 2, 3, 4. And we're going to have 5 cards. After you have our cards, we can now type in down here our script. So let's link up our JavaScript file script source. Let's call this cards.js. And let's also create a file cards.js. Hit enter, and that's pretty much it for this. Now let's go ahead and style this. And for here, we're going to start up with a body. Now for the background, I'm going to go straight ahead and use the URL from Unsplash, so the randomized URL. So HTTPS source unsplashed. I'm going to just paste in this random URL, and instead of random, I'm going to paste in the ID of a picture. Okay, so after we paste in this ID, you will see we'll have to just copy in this ID, because if I search for this again on the web, I'm going to go crazy. So these IDs are actually from unsplash.com, and each time you click on a picture, for example, this picture right here, you will see up here in the URL, after photos / you will have this code, and this is actually the ID of this photo. So whenever you change a photo, this is the ID. Okay, let me close this up, and this is where I get actually this ID. Now in order to center this, because you can see this is a bit out of place, we can now use right after the parentheses center / cover, and then no repeat in order for the image not to be repeated. Now I wish to have my body as 100 viewport heights. This is going to stretch everything out, and also everything that I place into the body should have a display of flex. Now because we use flex, we can now display everything as flex direction column, and we can now justify the content as centered. In order to have the items aligned to the center, we can also use align items center. Okay, so that's it for body. Next up, let's go ahead and create an overlay over this body, because you can see that the image is quite bright. Now the trick to do this is to grab onto the body and use a before or a after, it doesn't matter. Now we can set a empty content, so content of empty string, and we could give it a height of 100 viewport heights and a width of 100 viewport widths. And now in order to achieve that gradient over the image, we could use now a background color of RGBA, and let's type in 0, 0, and 0, and 0.4. Oh, and I forgot the 0 for the reds. So as soon as we do this, we can see this entire image has now a black gradient. Now let me also position this gradient as position absolute, so it's over our entire image, because if not, it is just treated as a separate element and is going to take up its own space. Now I also wanted to have it as a background, so right now we can select all of our elements, so I could push this to the background by using a z index of -1. Alright, so this one is done. Now let's take care of our navigation, because our navigation is down here and it should be up here. So for this, we're just going to grab onto the class of navbar. We're going to position it fixed. Now, by positioning it fixed, we can position it in a certain area of the page fixed. So I'm going to position it up here to the top. You could also position it to the bottom, to the left, to the right, wherever you wish. But I'm going to push it to the top. So let's just type in top, and so let's just type in top and 0. Okay, now the navbar is positioned to the top. Now in order for our navbar to be spanned over the entire width of the page, we use width 100%. And this is going to be spanned, this is going to span the element to 100% of the width of its own container. And now let's also change the background by giving it a transparent background. So a very important thing with Bootstrap, each time we change a specific property of Bootstrap, we need to type in important. So the important marker will just override all of the settings that Bootstrap has initially for its styling. Now next up, let's take care of our anchor tags within here. So we can just grab one from the navbar, the class of navbar again, anchor tags, and let's change the color to a hexadecimal of DDD, and also important. Okay, now we will see all of the elements appearing again. So one last thing, we need to take care of the navigation button up there, and this is also pretty easy. It has a class, let me just check it, of navbar toggle. So this is the button from right here. So let's take this class of navbar toggle, go into our CSS, target it, and let's just change its background color to a hash of DDD, and again important. And there we go. Let's also take care of our H1 of our header title right there. So let's grab onto the H1 and let's text align it to the center. Let's change its color to hash DDD. Let's increase its font size to 8 rem. And let's also give it a text shadow of 1 pixel, 1 pixel, 2 pixels, and hash 333. Okay, so there's our title. Next up, let's take care of the cards container. So class cards container. I'm going to display this first of all as flex. And now I would resize this by using width, 90 viewport width. Now as you can see, we're flexing our containers, our cards, into a row direction, and they also occupy only 90 viewport width. Now you will see up here a bit of a border, and this is from the card class. So let's take the class of card, and this is a built-in Bootstrap property, so we can take this out by targeting the borders and displaying them as none. Okay, so we got rid of our borders. Now let's do a general styling for our card containers. So we can select our div with the class, not the class div, but the div itself, so the element tag with the class of card container. So not the cards container, but the card container itself. And now let's start off by giving them a height of 500 pixels, then a width of 600 pixels. And now this would change later on. Let's first of all give them a box shadow so we can see where our cards are. So box shadow, 1 pixel, 2 pixels, 5 pixels, 1 pixel, and RGBA of a white color. So I don't want this black color, but let's go completely white, but also with the opacity of 0.4. So there are our cards. Now when I go over our cards, I want to have a cursor of pointer so I know that I'm over the card. And let's also give them now a bit of a border radius of 15 pixels. Now let's also change the color, because for now we have this dark color for our text. So let's go ahead and change the color to #DDD. Let's also give the text a bit of a text shadow of, let's say, 1 pixel, 2 pixel, 2 pixels, and #free. Okay, now I want to give it a bit of a margin left and right. So let's go ahead and let's type in margin. So as I said, left and right, so top and bottom will be 0, and left and right 5 rem. Now I will position each and every card as relative, because later on I want to position the text as absolute within it. So let's position this relative, and that's basically it for now for our cards. Now in order to give them those background images, I'm going to now target each card on itself. But first, let me also give it a hover effect, so I know when I'm over a specific card. So let's say div, the class of card container, and now hover. And when we hover our cards, I'm just going to change, let me change the box shadow. I should close this up. So I'm going to copy the box shadow, paste it in here, but I'm going to change it to a opacity of 0.8. So when I hover over a card, we have the box shadow intensity changing. Now, because this is just a bit too quick for me, let's also give it a transition, and this will only affect the shadow. So 0.3 and ease in. So when I'm hovering over it, it's going to have a bit of an ease in effect. Now let's take the class of card, so div card, and now I'm going to select each element on itself. So for this I'm going to use nth child and the first one. I also could have used first child here instead of nth child, but I'm going to just copy this. So let's go in here. But after I set a background as a URL image, and for the images I'm going to use unsplashed again. So let me go up here and copy in actually this entire background. Paste it in here, and as I said, all we need to do is change the ID. So the first ID will be, actually let me leave it this way, copy it 4 more times, 1, 2, 3, 4. Let's change, this will be the second, the third, the fourth, and the fifth. Let's hit save, so we have 5 images within here. And now I'm just going to go over them and change their IDs. So the first one is going to have this ID. Let's hit save. So there's our PC. Then we're going to have, for the second child, this ID. So just double click on the ID, it's going to be selected. Now let's go to the third one, which is going to have this ID. The fourth one will have another ID. So this one, and the fifth one will have this ID. And that's it. Now each of them has an image within them. Now let's also go back to our HTML and change the description. So the second one was actually strategy. So let's go down. Not PC gains, but strategy. Then we have console. Then multiplayer. And the last one was sports. Or esports. This should be esports. Okay, so that's it for HTML. Now in our CSS, we just need to do a couple of things and then we're done. So in order to achieve that effect, I'm going to now target all of the cards. So div with the class of cards container, not this one, so card container. So each div that has the class of card container, and when they will have a class of visible, then they're going to flex with a flex of 5. Now let's go up to our main class when we, right here. Not only do I want them to have that flex, but also the transitions on when they're going to flex. I wanted to have a transition effect, transform, a transition effect only for the flex, of, let's say, 0.3 seconds, ease in, and that's it. Okay, now let's go back to our HTML and let's give the first card class here also the class of visible. Oh, I'm sorry, this should be active, not visible. What am I doing? The visible comes later on. So active, and also in our style.css, we need to change this to active. All right, now for the titles. So first of all, let's grab onto the class of card title. And as I said, we need to position it absolute. And now we can play around with it by pushing it from the left to with 30%. And let's also push it down from the top. So let's say from the top, it should also go down, let's say 40%. Now let's increase their font size. Let's say 5 rem. And now I'm going to make them disappear by giving them an opacity of 0. Now we're going to make them appear again using JavaScript. But when they appear, we're going to have a transition effect for the opacity with a duration of 3 seconds, ease in, and a delay of 0.2 seconds. Okay, so that's pretty much it for the UI. Next up, let's start with our JavaScript. So let's open up our JavaScript. Okay, so let's first of all start by grabbing out a couple of things from our DOM. I'm going to assign them to a couple of variables. So let's start with a const. And first we're going to need our dark mode btn. So let's go to the document. Let's go with a get element by ID. I'm going to grab onto the ID of dark mode btn. Okay, so let me just quickly console log this. As always, I love to console log things when I'm grabbing onto elements from the DOM because we can constantly make mistakes. So let's go open up our console. I'm going to change this to be at the bottom and zoom it in a bit. So there we go. It's safe. There's an input tag with the class of btn. We can't see it because we hid it. And hey, you dark button, you should be left button to report heights. Oh yeah, this is correct. Okay, so let's go back to JavaScript. So we grabbed onto our input tag. Next up, let's grab onto the body. Let's say const. I'm going to grab onto the entire body. I'm going to grab onto the entire body of our page. So let's go to document.querySelector. I'm going to select the body tag. Okay, let's also console log this one. You can see now we have everything that is in our body tag. Next up, I'm going to grab on to the image. But when you're applying this to sites, you should grab onto all of the images, not one particular image, because the problem is the way we're going to flip this dark mode is not affecting images, and that is why we need to specifically grab onto also images. So I would suggest create a const of images dot document query selector all and grab onto all of the image tags. Now believe me, this is going to save you a lot of headache. So we also grabbed onto this. Let's console log it and images. Oh yeah, because we're using query selector. We are getting a node list. Okay. So if we had multiple images, you see we have the length of 0, which is actually 1, but you know, JavaScript starts at 0. Okay, so we grabbed down to anything that we need. Now let's grab onto our button. So dark mode button dot add event listener, and we're going to listen for a click. And when we're going to click, we are going to use the arrow function. So I could use function, and we need an argument. We want to grab onto an event, or you could use an arrow function. Now, as you wish, you could leave it either this way or take out the keyword function and use a arrow. This is going to be exactly the same thing. So let's go in here. Let's go into our function, and let's first of all create a condition. So if, and going to comment out this if statement and show you for something. So let's console log the event. If I click on this button, it's going to give me the event, mouse event. Okay. Now, if I do e.target, it's going to give me what the event targeted, and in this case, is what it was this button. Now you know that input tags with the type of checkbox have a state of checked. If I check now, so let's go now down in our if statement. If I check if the e.target is checked, so this just means it exists as checked, then let's say console log yes, and else we are going to console log a string of no. So if I click on it, it's going to give me yes. Now if I click on it again, it's going to uncheck it, it's going to give me no. So each time I click on it, it's going to either check or uncheck itself. Okay, we got this out of the way. Now let me comment this out and let's actually do something. So we want it when we check this to go into dark mode. So if that e.target is checked, then the first click will be check, so yes. Then we want our body dot style dot filter, and we're going to give it a filter of invert of 100%. Just type in here 100. And if it's not checked, so if it's unchecked, we're going to go back to 0. So what this will do is if I click on it, I'll show you, it's going to filter and change everything into and flip everything around, accepting the image. Now in order to solve this, we would need to grab onto the image and do the same thing specifically for the image. Okay, it does not work with images automatically. We need to specifically target the image. And this is why I said you should use images to grab onto all the images and apply it to all images at once. If not, then you would need to apply to each image individually. That was a hard word, individually. Okay, so that's it. Let's copy this body.style.filter and replace it with image. If you would have one image, but we don't have one image, so let's go down here and do for each. I'm going to use a function, callback function within here for each image, or you could do a arrow function. So take out the keyword, arrow for each image, grab onto the image and style.filter.100. And if not, because if I only save here and do the dark mode, boom, the image is correct. If I flip back, that is going to do the same thing. So it's not going to flip back to this. So we're going to take all of the images and change them back to 0 when we come out of dark mode. Okay, so as you can see, this is working perfectly. Now, in order to have that effect that we talked about, that easing effect, or that animation effect, now go underneath our if statement and let's create another if statement, if, and now we're going to use a negation. So if not body dot class list dot contains the class of animate, so if it does not contain the class of animate, this is why the exclamation mark is there, which is the negation, then the body dot class list dot toggle the class of animate. Okay, so let's check this out. So if we click on dark mode, then it's going to add that class of animate. If we click on dark mode again, and then again on dark mode, then we have a problem. Okay, because it's still having this class of animate. So we need now to remove it. So else body dot class list dot remove the class of animate. Okay, so if I click on dark mode, it's going to let me also go out of here. So if I click on dark mode, wait a second, now if I click on dark mode, it's going to animate in our dark mode, and you can see also this hover effect changes. As you can remember, although we gave it a hover of background color, well, a dark color, and a text color of a grayish color, when we're in dark mode, it's exactly the reverse of this. Okay, so let's click on this again, and let's also try our navigation. You can see the navigation also changes color. Okay, so that's pretty much it for a project. Hope you enjoyed it, and catch you next time. Bye bye.